Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another powerful mindset interview series. This is a very special one for me for a number of reasons. One, it's my first repeat guest. We've had 20 different interview series so far. This is my first repeat one, and it's my very best friend, Dwayne Matthews. We've known each other since we were kids. Our parents go generations back, and Dwayne is more than just a friend to me. He's kind of like a co-designer of my own soul. The type of conversations that we've had over our years has directly influenced my character, my personality, my goals, my dreams, who I am as a father. So it's very, very special to have him here with us today. But this is another very, very special week because Dwayne is now a published author. And when I went to purchase the book yesterday, I had a moment. I'm like, Dwayne Matthews, my best friend, is a published author. And I was about to drive in the car, and I actually had to take a minute to think, like, my man's a published author. And I felt almost as part of the victory as you did. So I was so excited. And I don't think it hit me until I saw it on Amazon. I'm like, wow, this is outstanding. So, Dwayne, I wanted to welcome you to the Power Mindset. Please tell us your story.
Jeff, listen, man, I'm just a little bit emotional listening to that introduction, and thank you very much. For the people on the Power Mindset, Jeff talks about us going way back. I mean, way back. I met Jeff when I was 10. He came to Trinidad and Tobago. I was growing up, and my mom brought me to see him because his grandfather was ill, and we sat down and we spoke like souls that knew each other for 100 years before. I think we spoke till maybe 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and then that was it. And then I moved to Canada, which is a story we could probably get into. I moved to Canada in 1988, and it was, I mean, there's 2 years that went between that, and it was as if no time had passed at all. We connected right away. We hung out. You know, Jeff was responsible for me meeting my wife. I've been married for 24 years. I've known my wife for like 36. He was there with my when my first child was born, my son was born. We've sat down and spoken for hours, coming out of nightclubs as kids on the side of the road, and thinking about the universe and life and reality and what we're going to do, and just a lot of our character. And so you're right. You do share a lot of this victory because a lot of the principles and protocols that I've developed over time is really based off of the lived experience of a number of those conversations over time. So a little bit about me. I am a keynote speaker. I speak on the future of work. I'm a futurist. I spend time speaking to some heads of state, some directors of education, some leaders in industry about how to prepare for the fast unfolding digital world, and what are some of the things that I think are really important. And some people take that, and go with it. Some people take it with a grain of salt. But this is what I do. I've probably now spoken to thousands and thousands of people in a number of different countries around the world. I've had an opportunity to address our former prime minister. I've had an opportunity to address 54 African leaders at the UN, thousands and thousands of people. And over the last 2 years, my posts on the future of education, the future of work, and the advancing AI revolution has been viewed over 2 million times. Um, and so, but what I'm most excited about, what really gets me up in the morning, is being a father and a husband. A long time ago, actually, your aunt said to me, she goes, "You can be a community man or you can be a family man." She goes, "I haven't seen anybody do both really well," and so I lean more to the family man component. I get most of my joy spending time with my kids and my wife. So that's really me. And thank you very much for having me on again.
Yes, as I was saying, Dwayne makes life better, right? When you meet Dwayne, it's an experience you'll never forget. And in his vast array of experiences, he just makes people's lives better. And that's the best compliment you can give anyone on earth. Right? When your time on earth is finished, you've made the world better. And I think that's a tremendous place to be. Let's get into this book, Dwayne. Just tell the audience what was your inspiration or the origin story behind principles to protocols, letters to my son.
So, okay. So, you were there actually. So it's 26 hours into me being a father. My son is 26 hours old. He's about 5 pounds, quite small. And the doctors, in all their brilliance, decide they're going to hand this 26-hour-old human being over to my wife and I. We have zero experience with a human being that small. And, if their parents out there, there's a massive amount of trepidation. We're pretty nervous. We bring him, and my wife says, "You know what? We got to give him a bath." And I said, "Why are we giving him a bath? He's like a few hours old. Like, maybe we should wait like 90 days or something." And so at the time, there was this thing called a European bucket. I mean, sorry, a European bath, which is really like a bucket with no handle. And so I said, "Okay, well, I'll go first. I'll give him the bath first." And I put him in the bucket and I let him go. And, thinking he's going to sit up. But of course, he slinks under the water. He he almost drowns. I pick him up and I panic. I hand him over to my wife and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I do not want to see this child again until he's 16," right? And he turned 16 this year, and I always joke. I went across to my 16th birthday. I said, "Hey, how you doing? I'm your dad." But in all seriousness, what happened at that moment was I sat down and I really started to see myself as a father and really start to think about what kind of world am I raising him for? What kind of world is he going to grow up to meet? And how do I prepare him to survive and thrive? And, I had these ideas for about 2 years, right? So my son was born in 2009, and around 2011, I write lots of journals, and I was going through my journal, and there was a framework that I was working on when I just became a teacher. And so I dusted off this framework and I really started to think, I should really focus on this. It was very whimsical at the time and I didn't have a lot of focus when I was working on it as a teacher. But when I became a father, that focus really started to hone in. And so in 2011, I started writing letters to my son. And I started thinking about what are the most important things. And what evolved was really a reflection on my principles, my protocols, the things that I've learned, the things that took me a long time to learn. And I honed in on the framework itself, which I call the Matthews method. And then I really honed in on principles, mental models, and study techniques. So in this book, the initial principles, there are 26 principles with protocols. There are 10 mental models, and there are 7 techniques for studying and for learning. Because I thought you need to have principles, you need to have a framework as a delivery system, and you need to be a lifelong learner. So these things are going to be really important. And the journal then separated into two. So there's a personal journal, which is handwritten, and it's only for my son. There's only one copy of it. His mother hasn't seen it. The only people who have seen it are him and myself. And then there was a more public version, which really started to turn into, how do you live a life of purpose? How do you become resilient? How do you really think about continuous growth? What do you think about when you wake up every day, to guide you in a very, very noisy world? And slowly but surely, I started to realize that this is something that I should share. One of my beliefs is that in all of us, there is a stranded brilliance. And as we go through school and as we go through life, our stranded brilliance is not always celebrated at the stage that we're at. For example, I my gift is speaking. And when I went to school, the teachers always told me, stop speaking, right? So I spent most of my life trying my very best to speak less. And it was not until I dove into that particular gift that I met with a significant amount of success. But before that, I tried to do everything else. I was always trying to, it can't be this, it must be something else. But once I really, really honed in and focused on that, and I applied principles and protocols to it, things changed for me. And so that's what I share. The principles and protocols, this is not the end. This is not the last chapter. I'm not saying to people or to my son, this is the end all and be all. What I'm saying to people is, here are some principles and here are some protocols. Some you can take, some you can leave, some you can remix, and some you can create on your own. And my goal for my son is that he will realize it's important to live a principled life. I should start to create principles based on the things that I would like to do. And I should be able to reflect on those. And hopefully, I can pass the baton on to my children if I'm fortunate enough to be a grandfather.
I That's a wonderful summary. We're going to dive deeper into some of the details of your framework. But before we get into that, I want you to be very specific with your audience. Who is the intended audience of this book?
So that's a great question. So the audience is any father, any mother, any parent, any teen, or any person that is trying to think about, how do I navigate an unprecedented, noisy digital world? I think that what we tend to do is, as the world becomes more digital, I speak a lot on AI. People really focus on the tactics, right? Like, I need to be a prompt engineer. I need to go to school and learn how to make this AI hum. And one of the patterns that have become very obvious to me is that the more technologically advanced we become as a species, the more our humanity, or the opportunity to expand our humanity, goes up. And as a result, the focus really needs to be honing in on that sense of humanity. And when I look at that, I see principles, I see protocols, I see patterns. And I think that when we drive into those, we become a lot more powerful with the technological tools that we have. And so the book really is focused on that. If I were to say tomorrow, who would this book be for? I would say, if there is a father who's about to have a child, you know how you would get a book to put pictures and that sort of stuff. I would love that this is a book that's given to a brand new father who's about to become a dad, to say, these are some of the protocols that I've worked with. And you'll see when you get the book, there's a lot of space for you to create your own. There are questions where you can write right into the book. The book was not designed in a way that you read it and put it down. It was designed in a way that you read it, you come back to it, you make notes in it, you mark it up. I want it to be a living thing. And then you start to eventually create your own. You start to say, you know what, Dwayne, yeah, I kind of agree with that, but I think this is better for me. Right. And so that's the intention. Um, in a perfect world, the book will evolve to expand for more people to be able to really hone in on the principles and protocols. I think one of the most important things about this moment, this AI revolution, is that we really need to get very, very clear on what's important to us, who we are, and how do we conduct ourselves and what kind of world would we like to co-create. You talked at the very top about co-creation of a soul. And I think that was really sort of well put, right? How do we start to think about what is it exactly do we want to do and create out of the 100, the 70 to 100 summers that we have on planet Earth?
Dwayne, I want to before I'm going to dive into the specific principles in a second, but what I want you to take us back to is your process of writing the book. Because it seems to me, it seems almost very like an organic journey that came of evolved as you were living. Can you just talk about what was your process? Did you research? Did you go from your journals? What was the process of writing the book?
Yeah, maybe I'll go back a little bit further. And it was interesting because somebody asked me this the other day. They're like, what is the premise of your thinking? And the premise of my thinking is really a lived experience. So there are two things that happened. The first is my mother was a single mother when I was growing up, and she worked two jobs. So during school time, it was fine. I would come home on my own. I lived in Trinidad and Tobago. Um, I would get sort of, sort myself out. But in the summer, it was really tricky. So she would send me to live by my grandparents for the summer. And my grandparents lived on a compound on an oil refinery that was designed for expatriates. But when the oil company was nationalized, all the expatriates left. So imagine I live in a small neighborhood of about 60 houses, but there's no other human beings there but my grandparents. And I'm a small child. It's gated. On one side is beautiful banyan trees and well manicured lawns, and on the other side is the ocean. Not a beach, but the ocean. So I spent probably about 4 years sort of riding on my bike in a space like that on my own. And I started to think a lot because I would sit and just be staring at the ocean for hours. And I started to think a lot about, why am I here? What's most important? And those things were fuzzy to me. And when I was about 23, my grandfather sent for me. I was living in Toronto and he sent for me and he wanted to have a conversation with me. And he said something to me that planted a seed, and it just took root and I could never get rid of it. He said, Dwayne, man is not a creature of circumstance. Circumstance is a creature of man. And if you spend your life trying to figure out why that's true, you would have lived a fulfilled life. And he died shortly after, and it genuinely really impacted me and sent me on this long journey because I thought this is one principle that he shared with me, and it was so meaningful. So as a result, I thought, gosh, I should do a lot of reflecting, and then I should start to think about what are the principles, including that one, that I would like to share with my son? What are some of the things that I think are going to be important? And more importantly, what are the initial steps that he can take to turn that into habitual behavior, right? So, what are the protocols to those principles themselves? Because a lot of times we hear principles, but we don't know how do I get started, right? Like what can I do to get started? What are the first three things that I need to do? And so um, that took me on this journey. And that journey, you know, some of it was very personal. So those personal things are separate. And then some of the things are, what I think are relevant for a wider audience of people.
So, Dwayne, as a teacher, let's define our terms. So, because you talk about these concepts of principles and protocols, and I want you to be crystal clear to the audience. How do you define principles as it relates to your book? and how you define protocols.
Sure. So a principle is a mantra. It's a guiding sentence, right? A truth that you've uncovered. And that truth can be objective or the truth can be subjective, right? But it's a guiding truth that helps you to filter and to decide how you're going to conduct your life. The protocol is what is the practice? What is the actual practice? So, for example, one of my principles is be very aware and thoughtful about your internal conversation, right? So we have internal conversations running all day and they're habitual. If I show a very complex math problem to someone that didn't do well in math in high school, they start with a protocol and a principle. They'll say it right to me. What will they say? They say, I am not a math person, right? If somebody's really good at math, they'll say, I love math. This is my thing, right? So people have an internal conversation that will come out right when something is meaningful to them or they hit a certain moment. So my thing is manage your internal conversations. Well, how do I do that? If I say something that is unproductive for me, right? How do I offset that? So I'll say, well, say something twice that's productive. Spend time thinking about in the blank spaces, what are things that I need to say to myself that start to feel very natural, that I say over and over, right? And what could that be? It could be, you're looking to play soccer. I get better at soccer every day. Every day I get better. I'm getting stronger every day. I'm getting faster every day. And not as an affirmation in the morning, but something that you say all the time. When you catch yourself, you do a mental audit. What am I thinking about right now? Maybe now's a good time to say it, right? And think about how do I make that into a regular daily occurrence? Well, every time I say something negative about myself, I say two that's positive, right? And this principle was something that I got from watching sports. So there's a famous boxer, Floyd Mayweather, and every time he got hit, he would always hit the person twice because he always knew that if he did that, he'd always win on points no matter what. And if he could defend himself and not get knocked out and he hit the person twice to their once, he's always going to win. That's a principle. So his protocol was, how do I make sure that happens? What are all the techniques to make sure that happens? And so that's what I see as a protocol is like a list of habits. The principle is the guiding piece that says, I'm going to live my life by this. And a principle can be objective or it can be subjective. It just needs to be meaningful to the person themselves.
I want to expand on this concept, and I want you to see if you can take one of the principles you wrote in your book and the relating protocol that relates to it. Which one is
Sure.
one that you find is so our audience be like, okay, this is the what I'm going to get from reading this book.
Sure. So here's one, right? And I'll just read a small piece from it. Principle number 3, be a man of increase and expansion, guided by the 7-hour rule. So strive to be a man who's always learning and growing by committing to the 7-hour rule. Dedicate at least 1 hour every day to learn and grow and to improve in some area. This commitment increases the likelihood that you can always bring value or insightful information to any space that you enter, right? So the principle is to always be a man of increase and expansion, to always be learning. The 7-hour rule is the protocol, 1 hour every day learning something. So I said to my son, I go, you're in school right now, everybody's learning. You go to university, everybody's learning. You leave university, not everybody's learning. I go, if you commit to 1 hour every day, that it feels natural, like brushing your teeth, over the next 10 to 15 to 20 to 30 years, you would literally have thousands of hours of consistent learning that would feel absolutely natural in a number of different spaces. If you're constantly looking for things that you need to learn, you're also going to have a perpendicular advantage. You're going to be an aspiring polymath. And over 10 years to 15 years, 10,000 to 15,000 hours, think of all the things that you could learn while some people are not learning. Some people are focused on entertainment. Some people are thinking about when's their next vacation. I go, you will be able to really maximize your capability and your capacity. So that's an example of a principle and that's something that I live by my life by that principle. I spend an hour every day learning something.
Um, that's very powerful, and I like that principle very much, especially as an educator. It's very meaningful to me. And learning can be a lot of different ways. It can be learning how to cook. It can be learning,
Yep,
it could be
yep,
learning guitar. It could be learning a new stretch. It could be learning anything. So people
a
should be
hundred percent.
learning.
It doesn't have to be, no, you're 100% right. Doesn't have to be writing a book. Like one of the things that my son does is he's 16 and we haven't made dinner for him for maybe 2 years because he started to use his device to look for recipes that he would try. And so slowly but surely, he just got into, I'm going to make myself dinner all the time. So now he has breakfast and he makes himself dinner. He gets lunch at school. So, I no longer at 15 or 16, and he's actually very good at making dinner. He's better at making it than me at a lot of things because he spends an hour all the time thinking, let me go find a new recipe. Let me try and make this. Can you get me these things? He's cutting up his green seasoning from the garden. Um, all of these things. And people are like, oh, that's incredible. He's doing that at 16. I go, it's just an hour, right? That's 2 years of an hour every day where he's like, I'm just gonna focus on this. And whether that be sports, right? I'm not a very good team sport player, right? It's just not something that I focused on. And so he taught himself how to play basketball, right? He spent time. He did that. We're into science. And so he's taught himself on certain things. Now he's getting into quantum mechanics just looking at different videos and reading different journal entries. Just an hour every day. Just spend your time doing this. It could be taking pictures, right? So it's a lot of different things, but that's going to give him a lot more space and, where his passion and his curiosity takes him. But if he has the protocol of, boy, I'm into this, I can spend an hour for the next 90 days or the next 120 days every day, he's going to feel that momentum and he's going to get into that habit of if I would like to learn something, then I can. And then there's a different conversation that you start to have with yourself when you do that.
It's very powerful. I love the example too. I want to go back to something you said in your introduction in terms of contextualizing the principles in today's world. You mentioned briefly about why it's important to have your clear principles in this modern, fast-pacing, fast-moving, information bombarding AI universe that they're living in. I want you to expand on that in terms of why is being clear on your principles so key now today.
Right. And so when I look back across history, one of the things that I realize is most important is, and this is part of my Matthews method. The Matthews method, I should break it down, is three triangles, and they form a fourth triangle in the middle. And the first triangle is your will. And the reason why I think it's so important in today's fast pace, and it's actually always been important, is that your will to do something and your imagination to visualize what it is that you like to do is probably one of the most important things. And, if I use a modern day example of social media, right? Social media attempts to capture your imagination, capture your attention, capture your intention and your will, turns that into a commodity and resells it for hundreds of billions of dollars. If you are, we go back a little bit further. When you go to work, the CEO makes a lot of money because their job is to create a vision, right? Which is the imagination, and to capture the will. So when people go to work and you say, "What do you do?" They say, "We do this," right? This is what we do. And the CEO's role is to hold that. The CEO will have maybe four or five generals in executive positions, and that person gets paid the big bucks. The better they can hold the imagination and the willpower of people, however they do it, which is more money, better working environment, there's an exchange of time for money, however they do it, that becomes really important. So we realize what becomes so valuable is the one thing that we have, our will, your ability to say, "I am doing this," is really valuable. And in an economy of attention, it's important that we recognize that and that we hone that. And then it's important to think, well, what do we want to use our will for? Right? So the second triangle in the Matthews method is imagination. And I can break down the different dimensions of those. But imagination is the next. So where do I visualize myself going? What's the vision? Find me a really well-oiled company, you'll find a vision. Find me a well-oiled church, you'll find a vision. A government, you'll find a vision. An athlete, you'll find a vision, right? So what's the vision and how do I get there? And then the last part of the Matthews method, the third triangle, is habit. What are the habits of mind? What are the habits of action do I need to execute on daily, weekly, monthly, yearly to connect those other three? Which brings us to the fourth, which is attainment. This is how we attain things, right? And as we go through, we realize in a very simple way, this is how we attain things. What's my will? What's my imagination? And what are the habits to get me there? All things outside of that are things beyond our control, which we shouldn't spend too much time thinking about, right? We should think about what can we control. So in this busy time when I have social media coming at me, I have DMs coming at me, I have WhatsApp groups coming at me, notifications dinging all day. There are wars in all these different places and tons of media and the news and all these different things. I need to get really clear on what would I like to put my will towards. What is the vision that I have for myself? And what are the daily habits I'm going to practice mentally and physically to do that, to get what I want to get to, and whatever that attainment may be? Or I'm going to give my will away to someone else. I'm going to give my imagination away to someone else, and I'm going to let someone else dictate my habits, right? When we see the kids and our grown-ups staring back and forth, when I have elders in my family that keep on sending me, fake news stories that they get from Facebook at 3:30 in the morning, they've given up those things. And so it's really important, I think, to hone that. And I get that message from the big tech giants. If it's that important, if they're willing to spend billions of dollars to capture and harness this from me, then I understand that it's not whimsical, it's not something new agey. This is a practical thing that's very, very valuable, and I should really hone on to it and teach my son how to hone these things and direct them to attain the things that he would like to have in life.
A couple of things I want to mention about that, which I think are very powerful that come to mind, is one, it's an answer to a lot of the questions why parents are asking about what to do with technology, right? Like what to do with technology. But the way you frame it is not you're against technology. It's about not giving up your will to technology, right? You're creating your will to where you need to be, which I think is very powerful reframing of the technology problem, for lack of a better word.
Sure, and I'm this is something that I feel very passionate about. Like I when I speak to people, I said, they say, well, Dwayne, what do you think about technology in school? And I said, well, school's always been about technology, right? We created school around a 600-year-old technology called the printed book. We had another technology called the blackboard. We had another technology called the ballpoint pen. We put these things together in a strategy that we call school that started here in Canada, at least in the 1870s. And you can see chart after chart the impact of that technology. Now, when the printed book and printed words came out, the technology wasn't used for good, right? The first mass use of the printed words in the Western world was witch hunts, right? And there's a lot of people died because there was a problem with how that technology is applied. If you think about cars, cars are one of the most dangerous things that we get into. It took about 30 to 40 years before they started thinking about every car is going to have a seatbelt. So how do we manage that technology? The absolute most dangerous thing that we do as human beings, you and I are doing right now. We're sitting, and we're sitting because that's the best way for us to use the printed book technology. And sitting is directly related to sedentary lifestyle, which is directly related to heart disease, which is the number one killer of human beings on the planet. So what did we do? Well, we created the gym and we created fitness to offset that. And so I think what we have to do with the digital technology problem is to become intentional, right? And we become intentional by focusing on our will, our imagination, and our habits broken into two parts. What are the principles of engagement? Habits of mind. And what are the protocols? Habits of action. And I think once we focus on that, very much like the gym offsets the sedentary lifestyle, very much like the seatbelt offsets the accidents, the seatbelts, and all of the safety features that come into a car today, the airbags and all the different things. So now we start thinking, how do we start to mitigate the risk of a rapidly digital emerging world? And how do we maximize the opportunity? How do we expand our sense of humanity? Well, we have an opportunity to do that, but we have to get crystal clear on what the principles and the protocols are for engagement.
Another comment I want to make about the Matthews method is how each part of the triangle, which leads to attainment, connect to each other.
Yeah. So if you think about three triangles and a triangle in the middle, the first is will. And the will starts off with a thought or an intention, right? What do I want to do? I want to get up, right? I want to write something. It's the thought and the intention. And the will continues to the next point of that first triangle with focus. What I intend to focus on, right? If I intend to get an A on an exam, I'm going to have to remove distractions and focus. And then the third point of the will triangle is belief. I have to believe that I'm going to get this done. I recently had a keynote and I asked people, I go, which human being has run the fastest 100 meters of all time? And so the typical answer is Usain Bolt. The actual answer is Asafa Powell. No one has run 100 meters faster than Asafa Powell. He did it when he ran the fourth leg of their first world record. I don't know if you remember when Usain Bolt was practically running 50 meters down behind him, yelling at him to run. And what's also interesting is no one has run more sub-10s on 100 meters than Asafa Powell. But Asafa Powell has never won a major championship. So he has the capability. There's something about the belief that falls short in those big moments, right? So you have to have the intention, the thought, the focus, and the belief. And that's triangle number one. That's the will. So triangle number two, then, once you have the belief, well, what are you believing in? You have to see something. So triangle number two is imagination. And so it's the first part of the imagination is the result. I have to see the end. What does this look like? The next point is the process imagination. What are the first 3 to 4 initial steps? Can I see them? Can I see myself doing them? And then the third is the spiritual imagination. And whatever that is, that sense of belief, whether it be science, neuroscience, quantum physics, Christian religion, Buddhist religion, Muslim religion, whatever it is, but a sense of belief that links you to the will and the imagination. And then this leads to the third triangle, which is really about the protocols. What are your habits of mind to maintain the first two? What are your habits of action? Right? So if somebody says, I want to get into good shape, right? What can I do? Real simple. I need to see yourself being really fit. I need you to have an intention. I need you to stay focused. I need you to do, you know, 5 sets of 50 push-ups, 5 sets of 50 sit-ups, eat a half a cup of carbohydrates and some protein and get some sleep and do that for 9 weeks and tell me what happens. Right? So those are all the pieces. If that doesn't happen, what happened? Where did it break? Did your will shift? Did the imagination fail you? Was it the protocols? Right? But I think once you have those, you start getting into that fourth triangle in the middle, which is attainment. Right? How do I attain the things that I would like to do?
I want to, I want to, we could talk about the Matthews method all day, but I want to get to two discussions around impact. The first one I want to talk about, what would you ideally like this book to impact the world? What impact would you like it to have?
So one of the things that I think is very important is that when we have technological advancements, we expand our sense of humanity and we scale it. And so let me give you an example. You know, before the printed book shows up in the form of compulsory education, if I'm living in one part of the world, it's very difficult for me to imagine the other part of the world. The book transforms that, right? We can talk about Carl Jung or, we can talk about Mansa Musa because we have books. So it transports through time and space, and that expands our imagination. And a really practical application of an expanded imagination would be the Bannister effect, right? The Bannister effect, Roger Bannister for the audience, was the first person to break the 4-minute mile. And before that, people said it was impossible. The minute he broke it, it spread through different mediums, whether that medium be books, whether it be radio. And once that happened, the next year, high school students were breaking the 4-minute mile. When you and I were young, nobody was going to run faster than 979 Ben Johnson. Steroids or no steroids, right? It was just not happening. And now we have college athletes that are breaking 979, and we have somebody that ran 958 and somebody that ran 100 meters in a relay even faster than that. And so all of a sudden we start to realize that the transference of technology allows us to expand. Every single time that happens, we run into a problem of looking backwards before we look forwards. The impact that I would like to have is that now that we have this technological expansion of information, we can find information anywhere. The double-edged sword is that it's really distracting, right? It's very hard to focus. It's very hard to hone your attention on anything if there's massive amounts of DMs coming at you, massive amounts of notifications, social media everywhere. Everywhere you go, the news is on, right? If you go through the airport, it's on. If you're here in Toronto, it's on. So I think what becomes important is trying to think about, where do I focus? And where I focus, what's going to guide me is really going to be around the principles that I have and the things that I'm going to focus on every day, my daily habits, my mental habits. And it doesn't mean that you take mine. It means that you think long and hard, well, what do I want to do? What principles are going to help me get there? and what protocols are going to help me get there. And then I can go get all the technology. Then I can go get the AI. Then I can go get the phone. Then I can go to get the productivity apps. Then I can go, and now I know specifically what I can leave. I'm not getting everything. I'm just getting what I need, right? These are tools in a toolbox to do things. And what we have is a problem where we feel like we need to put our hands on everything, right? We see people scrolling, they're trying to get to the end of their social media, trying to get to the end of the TikTok. They can't, right? You can't get to the end of Instagram. It doesn't end, right? So you're always feeling like I'm missing out on something, right? Somebody
Uh,
said to me the other day, I'm having something and it's gonna be Squid Games. And I'm like, I don't know what Squid Games is. They're like, what? How do you not know? But my principle is that I'm not gonna feel a sense of FOMO if I don't know something, if it's not inside my focus, right? Because I can't know everything. And I spend time thinking about that. So I don't feel, oh gosh, I don't know. Something must be wrong with me. I'm like, I cannot know everything. I can't have everything, but I could probably have most things that I focus on, right? And so that now gives me a sense of calm where I can go to the person and say, no, I generally don't know what that is, right? I haven't seen the person told me it was a show. I'm like, I haven't seen it, haven't heard about it. And then I think, does it help me to do what I want? And if it does, then I'll go look for it. If not, then I continue not knowing about
the next thing I want you to reflect on, which is very, very important, but I want the audience to kind of visualize what this book can do for them. How has the creation of this book, how is the reflection on this book, how does it impact you and your personal journey, your journey as a father, and your journey as a professional?
Gosh, great question. So I think before I became a father, I mean, and you know me, I was sort of happy-go-lucky, right? There's a great book called The Tao of Pooh, and that reminded me of me. I was just kind of, you know, I lived a very fortunate, lucky life, and I was happy-go-lucky, but I was whimsical. I didn't have any focus. So, I would probably be one of these people that all my teachers would always say, Dwayne has so much potential, right? On my report cards with all the C's. He has so much potential. He could be so much more. And that's because I didn't have any focus. My son gave me a lot of focus, right? Because I thought, gosh, I just have to get diapers on this kid and food. But as he got older, I start to think this person's going to look to me to see how do I interact with the world? How do I interact with his mother? What are the things that I said to him? Right? How many helpful things versus how many hurtful things? Do I say over the course of a lifetime? Um, this person is going to go to school, and somewhere around grade 5 or grade 6, they're going to have experiences and they're going to ascribe meaning to it. And if I don't have a relationship or a conversation with him, either directly, verbally, or through something that I've written down, the interpretation could go against him, right? You and I are both teachers. We know that there are a lot of people that are still taking advice from their 13-year-old self from a painful moment or a series of painful moments that they've had. Um, and so I really wanted to offset that. But for me, then it really forced me to start thinking about what are my principles? Do I actually have them written down? Right? Like, I want to share something with him, but what's important to me? Right? So one of my principles, for example, is guard the inner man, right? Guard that person. People are going to come to try and capture your will, whether nefariously or whether innocuously, on purpose, consciously, by accident, because they're trying to create meaning for the world. You need to really guard that and be yourself, be the person that you would like to be, and think long and hard about what information gets in and what information you reject and why, right? Um, And so it's really sort of helped me to do that. I mean, for a while I put on a bunch of weight. How can I use principles and protocols to impact my health, impact my weight? How could I use it to impact what I learn? Um, my keynote speaking, how does it help with that? How do I design my life around the things that I want to do? And what are the guiding principles and protocols that if I did on a consistent basis over a 24 to 36 month period are going to have impact? And that's really transformed and changed me. It's changed the type of husband that I am, with my wife. One of the things that, my kids will tell you is that I never raise my voice in the house, ever, right? If we have disagreements, I speak at this level and I don't raise my voice. But I'm not afraid to have a disagreement from my kids with my wife. So then they can see that we're going to get into disagreements, we're going to work them out. But I always approach the situation with a high level of respect. And so that is one thing that, has that's been so impactful in my life. How do I engage with my kids? How do I start to appreciate all the little moments, right? When I was younger, I thought happiness was things, right? So maybe I'll get some nice clothes and that'll make me happy. And then somewhere around 25 and 35, I thought happiness was experiences. You know what I need to do? I need to travel and to see everything. And you and I both traveled a bunch. And after a while, you see the Eiffel Tower, you see a couple of squares, and you eat a couple of bread and cheese and glasses of wine. You start to realize, no, it's the way that you interpret the moment that brings you the sense of joy. And so you can interpret a moment from anywhere. And so going through this process really helped me to start thinking about what is it that I actually want? What is it, the principles that I can use to actually do that? Not what I think I should have, not what somebody told me I should have, but what do I actually want? And how do I, conduct myself? One of the things that I know a lot of people talk about is gratitude. Is I wake up every morning and I take 3 minutes and I go through just a simple process. What are the things I'm grateful for? Right? I'm grateful for contemplating all of my problems while having a 10-minute hot shower. Because I grew up with no 10-minute hot shower. I grew up with hot water in a bucket. And so a 10-minute hot shower is something that I prayed for years and years. And, I can sit back and think, gosh, I'm trying to, I got a bill to pay or something to pay. And I'm like, I'm contemplating that challenge in this hot minute. So I spent a lot of time focusing on that. And that has brought me a lot of meaning. And I think the only thing that we really have is meaning, and what it means to us to experience life. We can look at things externally, and we still science still hasn't been able to figure out why something is meaningful to an individual, and there's no way right now to record that. We can see electrical impulses going back and forth, but we don't know why does it mean something to Jeff? Why does it mean something to Dwayne? And I think going through this process of reflection, and having it be so meaningful, to write this first iteration for my son, and my next iteration for my daughter will come when she's 16. And, what does that mean? And so that's given me a lot of joy, regardless of what's happening outside, because I pulled a lot of it inside to me. And that's changed a lot over the last 25 to 30 years. It wasn't always like that before. I like the nice things, give me a nice watch and, maybe I'll get a super fancy car. And then it was, I want to travel. I want to, get on a Serengeti and see the wildebeest running and, maybe take some pictures in front of the Eiffel Tower. And now it could be something as simple as, I'm sitting down and my daughter is telling me a joke and me thinking, this is a fleeting moment and I should focus in on this moment. and I get a real sense of joy from that. So this process has really helped me with that.
It's interesting. Listening to you speak, I summarize it as kind of like you taking the steering wheel to your own happiness, right? Like
Yeah,
it's the ability to be clear on your path to joy, to accomplishment, to meaning, and then turning your energy inward and letting the energy flow from you inward outward to the world, which is
yeah.
instead of looking for it outward to give you joy, your energy is going inward and your joy is going to flow out to the world through your book, through your keynote speakers, through your interactions with the people on earth.
And that's a great way to summarize it. And then you can go out and you can get the things that you want to help you with that, right? So a big thing for me is to, you know, to have an abundance of health, right? So now I can think, okay, well, how do I go do that? So now I'm going to focus on what do I eat? Now I'm going to focus on exercising. Now I'm going to focus on the gym. Now I'm going to focus on, I have a watch that's telling me, what's my heart rate? Now I can go get the things outside because I'm very clear. And I'm also very clear on, gosh, if I don't have that, I'm just going to do push-ups and sit-ups because I got that, right? And that's more than plenty people, right? There's millions of people can't do push-ups and a sit-up around the world for whatever reason. Limbs are missing, their health is failing, whatever it is. I go, I talked a little bit about it. I'm like, gosh, if we're lucky, we get 70 to 100 summers. It's not a lot, right? So you kind of, and we wake up, it's 50-50 for everybody, right? Regardless of where they are. I lost a stepsister to cancer, and I remember saying that to her. I go, this is 50-50. I go, it appears that this is more inevitable for you. I go, but I get hit by a bus, right? And this whole thing goes sideways, right? And so I think being able to do that is very helpful because we can't we have developed a world of abundance that the vast majority of us have more today than the vast majority of people 200 years ago. And that's expanding. And so we have to manage that mentally, right? Because that's actually quite heavy. It's quite heavy to go to the grocery and have access to packaged goods, right? Like I can remember thinking, boy, I'd love to have strawberries and I'd love to have cereal, right? I'd love to have, you remember when I first came, what I ate? I think I ate Big Macs and drank cherry Coke for a year. Do you remember? Like I was just like, oh my gosh, like there's a McDonald's everywhere I look. And at the time when I was growing up, there was no McDonald's in the Caribbean. But you need to manage that, right? Like you need to manage that kind of abundance because that's not good. So, I think it's very important that as we start going through, we just get this opportunity to expand and scale things that were unscalable. And I think what becomes very important is what are the guiding principles that you have and whether people will go out and buy the book and I think you'd mentioned that it was out of stock today and hopefully we'll get that back in stock so thank you to everybody that went out and bought the books. It was I felt a massive amount of gratitude waking up this morning and realizing that in a day the books were out of stock and we had to call and see if we could get those restocked. So that was really cool. But I think it becomes very important that we focus on what are the guiding principles when parents are telling me about digital, right? Things like social media. I mean, I think people talk about screens. Personally, I say forget the problem of the screen. I go, social media is the demon that needs to be slayed. It's designed in a way to really harness your will, to increase your anxiety, to, and there's good stuff in there. There's good stuff on social media, a lot of good stuff, which is what makes it tricky, right? And being able to find principles to guide your way through that is going to be so important. I'll tell you a story really quickly. We had a birthday party for my daughter. And you know how we do in the Caribbean, the parties aren't just kids, it's everybody that's, from 2 months to 100 years old is there, and there's music and food. And so in the invitation, I sent a note to the parents. I said, to the preteens and the teens, I'd love to have them, but they have to leave their devices in the car. And they're going to have to come in and deal with the discomfort of having to meet each other and figure out what they're going to do. And if they do have a challenge with that, then I'm asking for them to stay home. And every parent sent me back a note, said thank you. And every kid came and left their phone outside. And you know what they did? They start talking, they start hanging out. People start
Wow,
to think about who is cute.
what a
They
concept.
start to play games, right? We went downstairs, they were laughing, they were playing games, they were engaged. And I thought, you know, it's just a principle. If every parent just said, you have your phone, you have your device, but when you walk into a house, it's going to have to stay in this basket, it's going to have to stay in the car, and you guys are just going to have to engage each other, or you can stay home, right? You give the option. I go, wouldn't that be something? I go, because I don't think my kids got lots of devices, right? Both my kids have two devices each. But a principle for us is we have pioneer time. Pioneer time is a 3 to 4 hour spot where there is no device. There's time for that 7 hour rule. And, you know, nobody's falling apart, right? It's actually worked quite well. And even for me, it works quite well. So even when people can't find me, that's why. Because it's pioneer time. I'm off social media. I'm not looking. I have no notifications on, all of those things. And so, so people finding these principles and these protocols, and then they can go think about these really powerful tools that we have access to.
Dwayne, we're going to leave the conversation with this one last question. So, my company, the Power Mindset, JC's the Power Mindset, I deal with kids from 12 to 25. If you were to say one message, one defining message to that group of kids who 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 are investing their time and money to improve their mindset, what's that one message you send to those kids?
My message would be pick 3 principles and protocols that you can use to guide your life for 90 days. 3, whatever those principles and protocols are, but pick them based on what you would like to achieve. Feeling better about yourself, getting fitter, smarter grades, being more charismatic, better dressed. I don't care what it is, right? Pick those, try it for 90 days, and say to yourself, this is just like brushing my teeth. Keep a notebook on your phone, handwritten. Today I did it. And how did I feel? Today I did it. How do I feel? Today I didn't do it. How do I feel? And at the end of that, audit and look and see what exactly happened. How do I feel when? And the reason I think that's really important is because it's important to reflect on how do your habits of mind, your habits of action, and your guiding principles, how do they impact you? Did they work? Did they not work? Did you do it? Did you not do it? and be very honest with yourself about what happened. And then the last thing that I would say is find out what a mental model is and go find 10 of them. And every 30 to 90 days, spend time just thinking through one mental model so that you get familiar with it. And once you do that, I promise you, any way that you put that into a crucible and you start stirring it up, wherever you are today, in 90 to 120 days, you're going to be in a much better position, regardless of the situation, right? I call this the kettlebell swing, right? Which is like, if you do this for 90 days and you eat this way, it's going to impact you, whether you're big bone, whether you're, 200 pounds, whether you're 120 pounds, it will have a positive impact. And that will be universal. And so that's what I would say to those students is whatever that is, find what it is. You want to get fitter, say, I'm going to do 20 push-ups every day, right? For the next 90 days, because I am a push-up guy. I'm a push-up girl. See what happens, right? I'm going to not have sugar, right? I'm just going to have fruits. See what happens, right? What's my principle? I'm going to wake up at 5:30 every morning and spend 10 minutes of mindfulness, right? I'll tell you this really quickly, and it may embarrass my wife. I hope it doesn't. My wife started to do 5 minutes of mindfulness and 10 minutes of yoga every day for the last 2 years. Her mental state of mind is transformed. Her body has transformed. How she deals with problems. 15 minutes. She doesn't even, she rolls out of bed in her PJs before she goes to the bathroom. She gets down, she sits on the floor, she does 5 minutes of mindfulness and 10 minutes of yoga, right? On the Apple Fitness Plus, she puts on her headphones. The transformation has been staggering, right? I sit in awe of what she's been able to accomplish with 15 minutes over 36 months. So I would say to people, it doesn't need to be something that's big. You have principles and protocols today that you're functioning on today. And if they're not giving you what you want, then just add in ones that will give you what you want. And 90 days, try it for 90 days and see what happens.
Dwayne, this has been an epic conversation. Tell people what you're up to next, where they can find you, and where they can find your book.
Okay, so the book is Principles to Protocols, Letters to My Son by Dwayne Matthews. It is on Amazon.com. It is on Amazon.ca in softcover, and there is a limited edition in hardcover. In terms of what's next for me, I am delivering a keynote talk for the We Tech Alliance at the Caesar Windsor. We're looking at AI, the impact on a workforce, principles and protocols for an entire city. It is, I believe, about 60% sold out. It's September 18th at the Caesar Windsor. You can Google that, We Tech Alliance, and the Windsor Tourism Board is putting it on. And that's it's probably going to be one of my best ones because anybody that knows me knows that I went to the University of Windsor. It was a life-changing moment for me. It's a full circle moment. I haven't been back there in decades. And so to go back home and get that opportunity to do that at Windsor, I'm probably going to be coming in at about 225% of excitement. So if people have an opportunity to go there, I'm going to be in PEI. I'm going to be out in Alberta, New York, and a few other places. The other best place to find me is on LinkedIn. I post every day, and I'm creating a community called Principles to Protocol, and I'll send you the link, Jeff, so you can share on my Substack. And I would love people to join the community on my Substack. I'll be talking there about some of the principles and protocols in the book. There is going to be a paid section, and if people sign up for that subscription, I'll send them a version of the book for free and the other companion that won't be on Amazon for free as well. That'll be included in that subscription. And we'll be talking a lot about principles and protocols from different generations, different people from different places, and some of the things that I'm doing to help my children survive and thrive through the new digital revolution. So, Jeff, I want to say thank you very much. One of my goals, one of my principles is to have a meaningful face-to-face conversation with someone every week. And as always, man, this is probably one of the most meaningful face-to-face conversations, even though we're not physically there. I really, really genuinely appreciate you. I appreciate your friendship, and the continued inspiration that you send to me. I really appreciate that. So thank you very much, and thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you very much, Dwayne Matthews, for your time. And until next time.